Hello and welcome to another Tech Articles. In today's article, we are going to be looking at another Flowmattic tutorial. And in this tutorial, we're going to do something that is very requested of me. Speaking to the tin is very, very requested by support to Flowmattic and also within the Facebook group. And that's how to sync users between two or more websites using Flowmattic. And with regards to this tutorial, what we're going to cover today is this. So we are going to create a user on one site and we're going to sync that detail to the second site, including their password, so they can log into both sites at the same time with the same details. So one of the common use cases for this would be a main site with a membership subdomain would be probably one of the most common use cases where you'd want to do this. And we'll do both directions. We'll do a send and a receive to both sites right at the beginning too, so you can see how it work. And we'll log into one of those accounts so you can see that it all works. And then we'll go through the workflow and all the bits and pieces. What I'm not covering in this video is keeping those users synced. That is a much more complicated flow and would require all sorts of moving parts to keep two user details synced between two sites. It can be done. It just requires additional work to do that, because you have to fire off every meta and you have to make sure meta update, and you have to make sure things, for example, like you're not firing one after the other and getting into a doom cycle between two sites of firing an update, sending an update. So you have to use transients and stuff to keep yourself in motion. But it can be done, but it's not covered in this video. And I'm not covering additional user meta either. I'm only covering the base user meta of name, first name, last name, email address, username, password, role. So subscriber, administrator, member, whatever your roles are, I'll cover that. But that is it. Additional meta works exactly the same way. You'll just have to send it and work it out. But every case for additional meta is unique. So I'm not covering that either. So to begin with, we're going to create some user accounts and show them working. So I've got two sites here, two brand new installs with a couple of flows set up on them. One called send and one called received. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the send and the receives user panels. I'm going to start with the send, and I'm going to send a new user to receive. So I'm going to add new user, and I'm going to call this send user, and I'm going to put send at, and then my details, and I'm going to make me an administrator. I'm going to copy that password and I'm going to add that user. Now if we head over here, you'll see it doesn't exist, but if we refresh the page, we now have send user at administrative level with the details we just used. Even though I'm on a totally separate site, it's on both sites now. Now I'm going to open a new incognito window, and I'm going to, it was receive, wasn't it? Yeah. I'm going to go to receive. And I'm going to log in with whatever that username was, send user, and I'm going to put my password in, and I'm in, and as you can see, I'm an administrator of the site. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to delete that user from the sites, and I'm going to send one the other way and do exactly the same again. So I can add a new user, and in this case, we're going to call it the received user. And we're going to give it received at div. And we're going to make this guy a subscriber. No, we'll make it an editor. So it's different. And we'll copy that password too. And I'm going to create a new add this new user. And I'm going to head over to this site here. And you can see we now have an editor role over here with the same details as we have here. So I'm now going to log in to send. and I'm going to log in with received user and that password, and you'll see I'm in and I have editor access. So that is how we do it, and this is what the workflow will be showing today. And so those users are deleted. There is no point trying to log in with those user details in these sites if they are still up. So I'm going to use the send as an example in this. So I've closed down the other site. They are both the same. They both have exactly the same setup on them. So the first thing I'm going to show is Flowmattic and the workflows. And then I'm going to open up WP Codebox. So we have two workflows here. One sends. So how this works is very simple. It's triggered by a new user. When a new user happens, we get some data. And this is the sort of data we get. And we grab this data, and the data we're going to be grabbing and using across some of these other items are here. So what we're going to take first is the user ID. We're going to use that in a second. Then we're going to use the send, email, login, first name, last name, and capabilities. Then we're going to call a PHP function. I'll go through WP Codebox and the PHP function in a minute. But we're going to retrieve the hashed password from the database for the user ID of that new user. And then we're using the API module within Flowmattic to send that to our webhook on the receiving site with parameters. Now, I haven't got any authentication here. I would suggest that you put some sort of process in place sending user details between sites, but it's entirely up to you. You don't have to. I haven't. It's going over HTTPS. It is secure, but I think I would probably put something on the receiving side to look for maybe a unique code in the parameters or something, so that you're at least 100% sure that what you're getting is from you and to do what you want to do. Just for security purposes. That's probably what I would do if I was to implement this on a live site. And obviously that's going to be unique to you. You want it to be as unique so that it's secure for you to do that. And I will say that the code that receives this and runs into the database does sanitize to try and stop SQL injection, but I would still protect it. So then we do an API call, as I said, to the webhook point, and we're sending to the other site so that it can create the user for us, the username, the email, the first name, the last name, the roles, and the password hash. And that's how send works. It's very simple. This is obviously triggered when the new user is made on this site or any site that's running this send workflow. And then I'll go to WP Codebox and I'll show you what it's doing in the password hash extraction. So all it's doing is going into the database, finding the user ID, and pulling out the password hash. Now, a little bit about password hashes in WordPress. WordPress uses its own hashing system, and it's not unique to each site. So when you transfer a password from one site to another in the traditional way, and like we're going to do in a second when I show you the receive, what you're doing is you're rehashing a password. So you're rehashing a hash, and that hash becomes the password, not the password. It's impossible to get a password. It's not impossible. It's very, very difficult to get a password from a hash. And hashes aren't necessarily totally unique either. It is possible using some very complicated cryptography to use tables to rebuild a hash. But regardless of that, the WordPress hashing is not unique between sites. It is a function that runs them. So if you take a password from site 1 and put it directly into the database of site 2, a user can still log in with that password. But the add user function doesn't put it directly in the database. What it does is it puts it into the database via the hash. So you're rehashing the hash. That sounds more complicated than it is, but that explains why we do the extra steps we do with regards to, there's a function in here to add your password to the database. And the reason we do that, even though we make a password when we're creating the user account, is because it's a hashed password. and subsequently you can't, if you rehash that password, it is not the same password anymore. And that's how that works. So if we head over to the receive now, this is what creates the new user on the receiving site. So this is just a webhook. It's triggered by a webhook, and this gets your data from your send. So this is the data we've sent over. So a password hash, for example, roles editor, last name, first name, email, username. And down here, you've got your hook data without it being taken into individual responses. The next thing I do is run this through another function, and this function extracts roles. And the reason for that is because when this data gets sent, and I don't know the reason for this, it seems to get merged with this roles name. It wasn't called roles editor when we sent it. It was called roles, and then it was editor true, like so down here, and it become roles editor 1. So what I've done in this case is written a script that just pulls out the data we want. So you give it the JSON data. So you give it this data here, the webhook data. And then, so if you look at that FM webhook data, and then we'll go down here, I'll show you in this one. So then we're sending FM webhook data as JSON data into this function. So this is the function, this is the JSON data, and basically it just looks for the word roles and then extracts the roles, in this case editor, and returns editor for you, because we need that to make sure the roles match. Then we create a new user, and this is really simple. We're using the data that came in from our webhook. So that's webhook 1, username, email, first name, last name. Now you'll see that I've added the password hash here as a password, and that's because it's irrelevant. It will be a hashed password, as I discussed earlier, but that's totally irrelevant because what we're going to do in a minute is we're going to add our hash directly to the user. And then we add our user role from this function here, and this will create as a new user. When it creates a new user, we then head here and we run our check and update password. And what we do here is we get the output of user ID, which comes from this function here. You'll get a success and a user ID. So we're grabbing the user ID from here, and we are sending that and the hash password into check update and password. And if we go to check update and password, what happens here is we're sending our user ID and our hash password. It checks that these are integers, it sanitizes our hash password, and then it finds that user in the database and adds the hash password into that user password field in the database. And then we've actually copied and pasted our hash from one site to the other, and we've not rehashed the password. So we now have the same password on both sites, and that allows the same user to log into both sites with the same password. And that's how it works. It is a very simple workflow that does something that's quite complicated and not as simple as you would expect it to be, but it is really easy to do. There isn't a lot in these workflows. If I open up the send workflow again for you, there is very, very little in these workflows to do. Once you get your head around the data you're sending and why you're sending the data, that's the key here. So this is just triggered on a new user, as I said. So you get your user IDs and all your details. You're then pulling the hash password out of the database, and you're sending it to your other site, and then it builds as we said. And that's it. We are now sending passwords and usernames from an account details from one to the other. So if I was signing up, for example, on this send domain as my main domain, I was paying for something on here, and I needed access to membership at the same site, I can then log straight in with those details. As I say at the beginning, this video doesn't cover keeping those details synced. That's a little bit more complicated and actually is an edge use case. Not everyone wants to do that, and it would make this video probably 40 minutes long. But that is how you take the base data from one site to another site to create identical user accounts on two WordPress websites using Flowmattic. As I say, I've only covered the basic meta here. Everything else works the same way. You can pull whatever you like from the user database in the same way that we have done with the password, for example, the same way as we have done in this script here, where we've pulled it out the hash password. You can pull out any meta you want, send it to the other site, and reassemble it the other side, so that you've got identical meta on both sites as well. This is totally fluid and adaptable to how you want your site to run and what data you want. But this is the basics of keeping user account 1 to user account 2 on 2 WordPress websites. Hopefully this video has been useful for you. If you like the video, please do like the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well if you want to see more videos on Flowmattic, WordPress, automation in general. There will be a link in the description below to the code, and I have written a small write-up about this particular process as well, because I know it seems easier than it seems harder than it is. It is very, very simple. It's very simple to do, and hopefully with the video and the write-up you should be able to do it with no problems at all and mirror exactly the same on your sites. Thank you for watching.